All right, guys, welcome back to the Establish the Pass podcast presented by ClutchPoints. I'm your host, Blake Lovell. With me, as always, my co-host, Dillon Reagan, back here looking ahead to the NFL draft, but doing so with comps. Dillon, we love the comps. Try to figure out who are these guys going to be like. They're not be these guys, but who are they going to be like? And we're going to specifically focus in on the quarterbacks for this one because, as we've talked about leading up to this, there's a lot of quarterbacks that seem to be in play pretty early on in this thing, and it's going to be kind of fascinating to see where these guys wind up. But it is kind of it's an interesting group because I think you see some pretty wide variety of opinions on some of these guys. I think Will Levis in particular comes to mind for me. Just seeing all the different, again, thoughts out there. But there's a lot of others, of course. CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, all these guys that are going to factor into the mix. But as we start to look ahead, Dillon, it is kind of, it's always a fun exercise to see, okay, the skill set, what are some guys they could compare to? Not to say they're going to go on and have the success or the careers that some of these guys have had, but what are some of the comps we could have? And again, this is a pretty intriguing group overall when you just look at some of these top quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's hard to ever predict that someone's going to have exactly like the next Tom Brady. Like people were joking with Brock Purdy because he's drafted so late and has some similar physical tools as a young Brady. But yeah, it's very it's just fun to do it. Obviously, to look through for all four of these QBs, especially after last year where we didn't do this exercise. It would have been tough to kind of do it with the QBs we didn't have four guys that were definitely going to be in the top 10. We probably could have done this the Joe Burrow draft with all the other talented players in there. But yeah, it's fun to just look at more so at the skill sets. It's not like you can kind of also, it's great here, you can kind of combine multiple players into one and be like, oh, he has the versatility of this player and he has the arm strength of this guy. So probably have a few different names that we'll mention with all of these. They're obviously still unique players, but it is fun to kind of project what we might see based on what we have in the past. And now that we have a nice Rolodex over the years of our NFL watching, we have some names. I'm sure there are some older players that maybe we didn't watch as much that could actually be better comps. I'll try to think of some on top of the ones that I have in mind from the last 20 some odd years. But yeah, it should be a fun, we're getting close. It's only 2 weeks away as we're recording this to the draft, and still a lot of drama with how this is all going to shake out. It doesn't seem so, like at one point it seemed like for sure CJ Stroud's the number one pick. Now it seems like Bryce Young might be again, and CJ Stroud might now go number two. So it's all over the place, and good time for draft talk for sure.
Yeah, well, let's talk about some of these quarterbacks. Like I said, we don't know exactly what the order is going to be, but let's start with Bryce Young just for the fun of it, because I think not to deny anyone else, but like he has been the most talked about guy the past 2 years now, really, when you think about it, in terms of just kind of his ascent in Alabama and the prospect he would become. And of course, everyone's talked about the size and all those things. And, we always find ways to knock guys. That's never going to be, that's what you do in the draft, right? Like you have to bring out the weaknesses. You have to find all the little bitty tiny things that you can knock a guy for. But I mean, it's pretty clear just from a talent standpoint. I mean, there's a lot to like here. Some of the comparisons I've seen looking at various articles, some people have got maybe Tua, which, that obviously would fit being an Alabama guy, not a lefty, but still, some similarities in terms of skill set. I've seen some that have talked about like Deshaun Watson. Pro Football Focus mentioned him perhaps as kind of a smaller Deshaun Watson. I think that's the phrase they used for Bryce Young. I don't know, like he's an interesting one because I think, again, the size is what everyone's going to focus on with him. And so if you're comparing him to a, 5-year NFL veteran right now, it's probably not the exact same. But if you're looking ahead and trying to figure those out, there are maybe a couple interesting ones you could look at that maybe fall in that range. Like I said, a smaller Deshaun Watson, or was that Tua have also been another one that's been mentioned.
Yeah, the athleticism of Bryce definitely sticks out when you think of some of the names you said there with Deshaun, and in terms of a smaller version of him. Russell Wilson was one commonly brought up, I think.
That's true. That's another one.
Yeah. A guy that doesn't want to run necessarily, but has the ability to do so. I think, if you take the size part of the equation out for a second and just think, though, of how supremely accurate he is in the middle part of the field, and even up to like 20, 25 yards down the field. I think that's where the Tua comparison for me could come through. One that I thought was interesting that isn't necessarily the player himself, because Bryce is much more athletic than him, but Drew Brees is one in terms of the size, and then also at what he was as a college prospect with his just elite accuracy that kind of stuck out. And it's like there were concerns about his size. Obviously, very different player, but it may be, yeah, this is where I like to combine the two. We got the athleticism of a Russell Wilson kind of mixed in with the anticipation, and the poise. And yeah, I mean, talk about a guy that throughout his time at Alabama, a lot of QBs there have been fantastic, obviously over the last few years, and guys have been really poised and don't seem to be like the moment's too big for them. Think of even this past season, former Alabama and Oklahoma quarterback Jalen Hurts, how cool he is under pressure. But I think Bryce Young has that similar kind of heartbeat, and that's another good comparison, I think, to Drew Brees, a guy that didn't really have any time in his career where it seemed like the moment was too big for him. Maybe some injuries ended up costing him late in his career, but nonetheless a guy that all the time seemed like the moment wasn't too big for him. So between all those things, Bryce doesn't have a massive cannon of an arm like maybe the next three guys that we're going to talk about in the same kind of fold. But I think in terms of if the thing about that's crazy about Bryce is like if he wasn't as short as he is, and he's not short, just in relative terms for a quarterback in the NFL.
So, yeah.
If he was though like 6'2", this wouldn't even be a conversation about who the number one pick is, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be pretty clear, just based on what we saw him do at Alabama. Yes, he has a lot of talented players around him, but that doesn't take away from some of the ball skills and elite plays he's been able to make over the course of his career. But I think, that's the blend of QBs. Some Russell Wilson, some smaller Deshaun, some Drew Brees for me. Those are three kind of mixed together is what we get with Bryce Young here.
All right. CJ Stroud, he's an interesting one because, again, I think this is another one where it's like it seems like a pretty wide range of opinions on what maybe would be the proper one. Now, I know Cynthia Freeland did something for NFL.com, and I found it pretty interesting. The two that she had is like the Dak, Prescott, and Jared Goff kind of combination, I guess you could say.
Okay. Interesting.
That's an interesting combination, right? But I could see like some of the Dak related stuff because I think you look at, like you talked about, just sort of the he can certainly do things out of the pocket, but we also know that he can, do things with his legs as well. And so I think I look at him and I'm just like, I feel like he may be someone that, again, we don't know if he's going to go one or two or whatever, but I do feel like he is more of that guy that the more I look at his skill set, the more confident I get that he's going to be just fine in like today's NFL. Because, like we said, I don't know if it's hard to think of what a Dak plus a Jared Goff could look like. But I mean, maybe it is CJ Stroud. But it's one of those strange things. And so the more you look at some of those, I mean, I think I do feel like he's probably set up, and it's probably situation is always important with these quarterbacks, especially. But that was one I found interesting to kind of throw the Dak one in there, and maybe it's not Dak plus Jared Goff, but maybe it's some shades of Dak Prescott in terms of some of the skills that he has.
I could see that for sure. I'd say that Stroud, at least at this point, we'll see it. It's a big adjustment going from playing college, especially to a place like Ohio State, to the NFL speed of things. But accuracy wise, It seems like Stroud would have the edge there. But that's why you see the combination here with Jared Goff. So it makes sense when you think about it between those two. One that I've seen on a few different places. I think it was a USA Today article. They put in Matt Ryan. I thought that was an interesting comparison in terms of maybe a more athletic Matt Ryan. Stroud, similar, doesn't want to always run. This isn't a Justin Fields situation, but he will if he has to, and he's very athletic. And he's think about the run that he had right at the end of the semifinal against Georgia to get them down in field goal range. He just weaving her eyes like it was nothing. I mean, he can if he has to. So maybe in terms of floor, maybe a higher floor here with Stroud. Maybe not than Bryce Young, but definitely for the next two, in my opinion. Where I feel like those other guys that we're going to get to in a sec might have higher ceilings potentially, but I think we know for sure what we're going to get with Stroud. His prospects, obviously, in the draft, as everyone knows, went up with that performance in that Georgia game after not the best showing against Michigan. But I really, as much as I think Matt Ryan kind of fits in, and maybe we we have to think about, all right, Matt Ryan when he was peak Matt Ryan, not the Matt Ryan we have at the moment. Obviously, at the top of his powers, one of the better quarterbacks in the league for many years for the Falcons. But I really like that Dak Jared that mix, because I understand kind of what it's getting to, the size, the build, the athleticism, the ability to run if he has to, parts of Dak, but some of the deficiencies that we've talked about with Dak, with some of his accuracy and anticipation at times, I feel like that's where Stroud kind of fills in. And as the more you look at his kind of clips and stuff that's been posted about what Stroud did at Ohio State, you see that this guy has elite placement deep down the field, and that's something that we know when Jared has a good pocket, he's able to have that kind of same accuracy on his deep passes. I like that combination, and maybe a little more than my Matt Ryan one. I think those two that's CJ Stroud right there. Pretty interesting mix there of different skill sets. And if you take the best of both those guys, yeah, you're going to be really happy with that quarterback.
All right, what about Anthony Richardson? Because I feel like he's one that I honestly I don't know where to start with Anthony Richardson. Certainly following him at Florida, and we talk about a guy again that kind of where the season started, got to in the middle, started to go back up. Like it was a very interesting season. I think his last year there at Florida, and now obviously we talked about what he the numbers that he's put up in terms of just the combine, those kind of things, and I don't even know where to start with Anthony Richardson. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Like I don't know who I would even compare him to right now. So
he's one of the harder ones. I mean, there's a reason that depending on in terms of draft board volatility, depending on where you read an article or look at a mock draft, he just has the widest range of outcomes. Even though now even the kind of people that are lower on him have admitted that the potential is so enticing that there's no way he's going to fall way too far in the draft. It's just a matter of where he goes. The one that I think PFF, they mentioned Josh Allen, and that's the ultimate, if he hits his percentile of what the possibilities. But looking back at Josh Allen, it makes sense in terms of he wasn't a sure thing, and we've talked about if he didn't end up in Buffalo with some of the QB coaches and offensive coordinators that he had early on in his career. I mean, his development, he did not have deep accuracy down the field. His numbers at Wyoming, and it probably helped him to an extent having to play at a place like Wyoming, not always against the toughest competition, but still at times still with not the best supporting cast around him, had to make it work. Not that Anthony Richardson went to a small school by any means, but Florida, obviously not the Florida Gators of maybe a decade ago. So I like that comparison in terms of we keep in mind what Josh was at the time. He has a huge arm. Some of these other ones, Jalen Hurts, Carson Wentz mixed together, that's hilarious. That's the NFL, the same one that I love that. That mix is great for Eagle fans, just to let their brains marinate on that. I saw Colin Kaepernick mentioned as a possibility. I think as a passer, Anthony Richardson has better potential. Kaepernick was pretty accurate, but maybe not deep down the field with some of those Greg Roman offenses in San Francisco. He's definitely one of the harder ones. I think the Josh Allen one, maybe it's a mix of the arm strength of Josh Allen with what Kaepernick could do. I like the Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts ones. I'm just trying to wrap my head around how that even all fits together. But and one that was when they first traded up, and there was a lot of smoke behind. I don't know what as we've talked about smoke screens in the past with these drafts about the Panthers' interest possibly in trading up for Richardson. A lot of comparison just based on the size and the conference he played in to Cam Newton. I just think he's a more at that time, Cam was probably a better, more accurate thrower. Cam was, he won a Heisman Trophy. Yeah. That comparison to me is a little, I'm not sure if it adds up the same way. But size-wise, yeah, sure. I mean, he's a big dude, and you see the talent. So some mix of Josh Allen and potential, but will he realize that? He has to end up in the right place. And even then, it's often there's a lot of big arm quarterbacks that are prospects that teams look at and feel like they can mold and kind of help them develop the fundamentals and skill sets to make it work at the highest level, and it doesn't usually end up as well as it did with Josh. So maybe to temper our expectations a bit here, but when Josh was drafted, there were only so many people that believed he could become great. I don't even think the biggest Josh Allen fans in that draft thought he'd become an MVP candidate. If they did, that's amazing. But it just you have to think about where we are now with Josh and where he was as a prospect.
Yeah, I think that's important to remember. I think saying he's going to be the next Josh Allen right out of the gate is probably not a great not a great comparison to have. But yes, it's all about kind of the skill set and the overall looking at that and what these guys can be too. Because like I said, they're not going to come in and just be the finished product right away, and they're all going to have time to kind of grow into that. All right, let's talk about Will Levis because the one I've seen the most, and of course Dillon being around Titans territory, everybody's like, what's the comparison for Will Levis? Well, the one you see the most is Ryan Tannehill, and I think that is scaring Titans fans to an extent because they're like, wait a second, if this is a possibility for us, which I don't know if he's going to get there at 11, we'll see. I think there would have to be a trade up, but even then, I'm not sure how the Titans fans would. I mean, there's no denying the arm, right? Like, I mean, it's. I mean, the numbers are what they are, and like I said, it's much of a sure thing. When you're a quarterback, a sure thing you need is an arm, and he's got the arm. It's just, like I said, it's a matter of what happens, and kind of I think the supporting cast, especially right off the bat, if he is someone that gets thrown into the mix right away. I've seen everybody from Ryan Tannehill to Jay Cutler, and I mean it's a wide range, and so I don't. This is another one that I don't have a great read on because, again, I think he's the most polarizing of this group just in terms of what people think. And, I mean, maybe you can throw Richardson in there too, and to a certain extent. But, like, I don't know what to expect with Will Levis because I don't know where he's going to wind up. And quite honestly, I think where he winds up is everything because I think that will play a big role probably. So.
Yeah, it feels like maybe the floor, at least from my understanding from most people that analyze this stuff much further, is that even though Richardson and Levis both have really high possible ceilings, there maybe Levis's floor is just a tad above. The range of outcomes for Anthony could be so. That's why it's so enticing because he might have the highest ceiling, but his floor is probably lower. Yeah. Whereas Levis, there's concerns about the accuracy, his strength. Obviously, his arm strength is not. You can't argue that in any way, and it's just a hard guy to look at because of what happened with Kentucky last year. They were just so much like as like the numbers between 2021 and 2022 for Levis are pretty strikingly different. Obviously, very different circumstances that he had a year ago. Fought through some injuries. I mean, you can't deny his toughness. The guy constantly felt like he was hurt last season and kept playing despite it. I'm sure that had some impact. The Tannehill one is interesting to me. I don't know if he's big and tough, but I think he's got a little more. I
don't really see that one.
A little more versatility as a player. He's able to throw on the run a bit better. The arm strength part of it maybe, but in terms of who he is as a player, it's hard to say. I'm trying to think of like one that's a little different than what I've kind of seen at these other places. Jameis Winston was mentioned in the one USA Today piece. I like that idea of the arm talent and the ability, but sometimes the accuracy and decision-making that kind of doesn't always fit in exactly with where you want it. So that one's an interesting one for me. But, yeah, I'm trying to think of anyone else. You said Jay Cutler. That one's interesting for sure, too. I thought Jay, over the course of his career, became a pretty dang good quarterback and improved on his accuracy and decision making and cut out a lot of things. Just some bad breaks for some of those Bears teams and some good years where they were really good and just didn't fight through and make the playoffs just because of where the NFC was. But that one is maybe, and got another team there in the SEC that's not really a football power in Vanderbilt. So I like that. Where Jay Cutler went. So I like that comparison between both of them. His arm strength's going to be fine. It's just, I think with he might need a little time, just the same way that you could probably say that Richardson does. Maybe Stroud and Bryce Young are a little more NFL ready. But I think, in the right situation and with the right grooming, I think maybe you look at Levis and feel like, all right, some of these deficiencies that we're looking at this point can be optimized. And that's why, who knows if it's something that has to, there's some, with some of these mock drafts recently that have had, or even just rumors out there, the Texans have Levis as the number 2 guy on their board, and if he's there, they might take him. I don't know if it's agents trying to just boost up his stock, or if it's actual buzz about it. But I don't deny that there is a lot of potential here with him. But somewhere between more versatile Ryan Tannehill and Jameis Winston. It's crazy to go from Josh Allen to that because, again, that is the highest end for Richardson of the spectrum for what he could maybe become. But it's not. I'm thinking more of the prospect Josh Allen. And here, I'm not saying that Levis will be a Ryan Tannehill or Jameis Winston. He could be have better success potentially, but I mean Ryan Tannehill, won't sleep on him. We put him in one of our top 10 lists one of the last few years for NFL quarterbacks after probably the 2019 or 20 season. He has been solid when he's healthy. So I think if that's what Levis is with with a little more mobility, I think that could be a pretty dang good quarterback in the NFL. I mean, the right situation can be on a winning playoff team for sure over time.
All right, so those are kind of the top guys, right? Like I think that's pretty much the group that you would expect is going to go in that top range, unless I'm forgetting someone. But I mean, Hendon Hooker, I think, is probably someone that's going to be higher on the board for some people. And of course, with him, he's coming off a significant injury, but again, NFL teams do their homework and kind of feel like they know where he's at. And boy, I tell you, Dylan, there was a stretch there with the SEC. It seemed like quarterback play was not that great, and now we're sitting here talking about Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, now Hendon Hooker, all potential likely first round type picks. So he's probably, I guess, the next one on the board again, unless I'm just overlooking someone. But yeah, I mean, he's an interesting one too because like you certainly saw the system he was in at Tennessee. Now that was Josh Heupel, unique sort of up-tempo. The numbers were there, but still, you see kind of what he can do as a quarterback. I've seen some comparisons. Deshaun Watson's a guy, too, that I've seen with him. So, yeah, there's a lot of possibilities, I guess, with someone like Hendon Hooker.
Yeah, he was obviously so great at Tennessee. He's in terms of his age, he's the Cooper Cup of quarterbacks because Cooper obviously came into the league at a decent at 24, 25, something like that when Cooper got drafted. But yeah, Hendon obviously great player. I think those comparisons definitely work. I'm trying to think of if I can think of a different one that fits in that same mold or any other quarterbacks even in this last. Well, I'm wearing a UCLA shirt right now. I should shout out Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who sounds like he's going to be going in the third or fourth round. I know the Ravens were a team mentioned, the Falcons, some teams in that kind of range. Maybe has a Tyler Huntley kind of where you feel like, all right, he's in there. He's got a chance to be successful as your backup quarterback and feel like, at least on from a cerebral place, he's as ready as a lot of these guys are with his experience at UCLA and with Chip Kelly and some of the pro concepts. So I think, I'll go with Tyler Huntley with a little more accuracy deep down the field with DTR. I watch a lot of DTR football. But, yeah, Hendon Hooker, obviously. I like the one on that NFL article where they put Daniel Jones. I do think that potentially, maybe not quite as big. He's still a big guy, but Daniel Jones, he doesn't necessarily look at. Then you are up there, and he's like a massive human. Maybe it's kind of a mix of those two, but more so of a pure passer. So I'm excited to see where he goes, but I'm sure the age thing is going to factor into where he's ultimately drafted. Unfortunately.
Yep, we'll see what happens, but we'll talk about all these other guys and say we may get into a few more quarterbacks as well, but a lot of other players we'll talk about kind of in an upcoming episode. We still got a couple weeks for the draft, so we'll talk about that in the next episode, do some more comps for other offensive guys, some defensive guys as well, so we'll get to that here on the next episode, Dylan. But, of course, for now, all the draft coverage leading up to it here in a couple weeks, it's all over Clutch Points, as is everything else, so let everybody know where they can find all that.
Yeah, you can go to the Clutch Points app to the NFL section. All the rumors, news, everything going on, still ongoing with the Lamar Jackson situation with Odell signed there in Baltimore. We got all that covered in the Clutch Points app. Then NFL section of the site, a lot of draft stuff. We do have a separate NFL draft section now. If you just go to ClutchPoints.com, it's right there at the top of the page. We have mock drafts coming out for every single team. Full mock drafts for every pick for all those teams, and then in addition to our every week or two, we got our new mock drafts coming out. Those are featured on our homepage quite a bit. If you just search mock draft, you'll find that in all those team ones. Lots of breakdowns of sleepers, all sorts of stuff. Basically anything you could think NFL draft, we got covered at Clutch Points, and we'll have plenty more over the next couple weeks, obviously.
Yep, be sure to check it all out there. A lot more to come, as you said, and we'll be talking about it here on the podcast as well, so be sure to subscribe to the podcast, any podcast app you use. Search for Establish the Pass. And thanks, as always, for listening to the podcast. We'll talk to you next time. You're on the Establish the Pass podcast.